Opposition to the regime was seen as an existential threat. Oppressive regimes become even more oppressive when they are vulnerable and they become weaker. So people didn't really realize or grasp how that could happen. We see a regime under Saddam Hussein that did not allow 5 people to gather unless the Ba'ath was their 6th. And then all of a sudden, Muhammad الصدر goes out in the mosque of Kufa with all of the symbolism of the mosque of Kufa. That's the place where Ali ibn Abi Talib, the highest icon of Shi'ism, governed and gave his sermons. Comes out and he times it exactly the day after Eid al-Ghadir, where it is in the Shia narrative. That was when Prophet Muhammad appointed Ali to the caliphate, a big dispute between the Shia and the Sunnis. And then he comes and says, nobody ever spoke the truth before me since the days of Ali, and I'm going to tell you the truth. He started to get 14,000 Iraqi youth from all kinds of backgrounds and from several governorates. They would come and camp on Thursday, waiting for Friday, and sometimes they began to come on Wednesday because the regime would block the road to Kufa on the night of Friday or before Friday, and they would come there for the prayer. And the sermons were fiery. They were all critical of the regime. They crossed so many lines. So people said that couldn't happen, and Saddam is keeping silent and tolerating him. So 2 dynamics took place. One, observers who looked at this, they said this must be a way for Saddam to let people vent out some steam, and it is a plot, and just to let this, and it is all under control. Another dynamic was more pernicious, in my opinion. The opposition who are outside Iraq, who made careers out of being the ones who spoke for the Iraqis, saw a challenge inside Iraq. Someone who is willing to be there. In a way, it exposed them. Why are you out? Why don't you come back to Iraq and lead the opposition? You are doing nothing other than sitting in Syria, London, or Tehran, for that matter, and then doing nothing. And they did nothing all of the time until 2003. The Iraqi opposition did nothing for the people inside, and except for just writing articles and things, mostly in pseudonyms. So what did they do to charge back? They said, well, he's the marja of the regime. You see the Al-Majlis Al-A'la under Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim at the time, actually publishing reports claiming that he is working with the regime and that he is the regime's tool to discredit the Shia. You see Al-Khou'i Foundation in London, where an article written in Al-Hayat paper attributing a statement to Sayyid Majid Al-Khou'i saying that Sayyid Muhammad al-Sadr is unqualified and he's not a marja, he is the marja of the regime.
Majid Al-Khou'i is the son of
Majid Al-Khou'i, the one you just mentioned, he was assassinated later in there. And he was the head of the Khou'i Foundation at the time. And then you see pretty much an onslaught of attacks against Muhammad al-Sadr, undermining his credibility. And then also from inside, and he didn't hold punches. Also, he went after them. He simply gave interviews saying that emulation of Khou'i is problematic, not as an attack of Sayyid Khou'i, Grand Ayatollah Abu al-Qasim Musa al-Khou'i, because he revered him, and there is no one who can really attack Khou'i on credentials. But he said he is being controlled by his entourage, his sons and the people around him, and he's just sitting there and they are doing things in his name, and these things are not religiously valid, and therefore if you take their word, you are emulating Khou'i and taking their word. What they do and what Khou'i orders or would order are different things. He was the one who was speaking about the Khou'i being silent and all of that. He went against other marjas also. Someone like Bashir al-Najafi, now he's one of the big 4 marjas in Najaf. He said he's not even a mujtahid. So in a way, not that he's not a Grand Ayatollah, not a marja. He went after it's just like going after someone who is a full professor and you say his PhD is in question. Don't talk to me about him being full professor. And he refused to actually sign on his residency. At the time, the resident Saddam Hussein always delegated the certification of residency of religious scholars there onto that. So those, in essence, the escalation was happening. He criticized the regime on services, electricity, etc. He criticized the regime on oppression. He refused to support the regime in its fight against the UN and the rest of the world, to come out and even they tried to get him to give or supplicate for Saddam, make a dua like all Friday sermon imams would do, and he refused. And finally he went after what was going on in hospitals, and then escalated in the week before his assassination to criticize Ali Hassan al-Majid, Chemical Ali, Saddam's cousin and right-hand man, for his wide-scale arrests of Sadrs. And he said, I give you 1 week. If you don't release all of these people, we will do different. So he was giving them an ultimatum, which clearly was an issue. He began to put even the rug where they wrap the dead bodies in a sermon. So he was putting there to show that he was willing to die. And on the eve of just one day after the last Friday sermon he gave 45 sermons, 45 weeks between 97 and 99. Well, actually 97, where his deputies were giving the sermons. He began in April 98, where he gave those sermons, and in February 99 he was assassinated on 19 February. So that's kind of what the documents, again, the set of documents on Sadr refute all that was written, including some credible scholars who, in a way, gave credit to the idea that Sadr was, in a way, with the regime. Right? Some people even looked at certain anecdotal evidence and considered it to be there. The documents refute that. For example, Pat Cockburn, in his book on Muqtada Sadr, took one incident to say that Sadr was, in a way, hand in hand with the government because the government allowed him to issue a newspaper. And nobody could issue a newspaper in Saddam's Iraq unless they allow him. Well, there is a set of documents that go from the Ba'ath Party to the Ministry of Religious Affairs to the Ministry of Information at the time. They all asking each other, how could that be published? And they said, we told him many times, and he just publishes it in defiance of our orders. Many other things like that. So as I go item by item, they were all refuted by the documents in that sense. One thing before I conclude here is basically on these documents. They are not representative of everything that was happening. What I wrote was about the documents themselves rather than going into a big context. The full manuscript